So many companies considering or are in the process of retrenching workers, and this is now due to the economic woes of the country. It's being exacerbated by the imposed lockdown to curb the spread of the COVID-19 disease. And of course, a critical part of retrenchment is discussions that follow, and it should focus on tax consequences on the final payments. And I must say, personally, you need to know these things. Really, really important to also remember when you are in those discussions. So to help you out and also to know which questions to ask, we have attorney at Tax Consulting SA, Darren Britz, on the line this evening. So, Darren, how's it going today?
Hi, sir. Very well, and yourself?
Very well, thank you, and welcome to the show. So let's get into this. Why is it so important that all employees fully understand the tax obligations on their severance packages?
I think the most important thing to understand is that those severance amounts will be taxed. I mean, it's amazing to think that so many employees are still unaware of that fact in itself. You know? So you can have a negotiation with your employer, and you can be discussing, I'll receive 2 months' salary, perhaps, a week per every year of service in terms of the law. And you're discussing these amounts before you consider the tax, And what happens then is you kind of get your amount paid in your bank account, perhaps a few weeks later. And suddenly you realize that amount is very different, to the amount you discussed up front with your employer.
Yeah.
That is your net amount less tax. So I think the most important thing to realize is that, yes, you will be taxed. And when you discuss with your employer, be very sure whether you're discussing numbers that are less tax or with tax, And I think if, likewise, with retrenchment, these are guys who perhaps that might be their last paycheck in a while, So if you're planning your affairs along the lines of this retrenchment package you're getting with your employer, you have to know that net amount, what amount will land in your bank account. So ultimately, that's the amount you're gonna be living on,
Yeah. All right, so tell me, Darren, with tax overall, there are different tax brackets, and does the same apply for the severance packages as well, and how do these work?
No, good point. So it does depend. Generally, there's two types of amounts you'll see on your retrenchment. These are amounts that are just due to you because of the services you've already rendered. So that's like a salary that's due to you, your leave pay, perhaps notice pay if it's in your contract. There might be a bit of a bonus that you've possibly accrued to you that haven't paid to you yet. That's all subject to your normal tax rates, just like your salary is every month, Then we've got a second amount, what you call a severance benefit. That is really the amount that gets the preferential tax treatment. We always hear about this 500,000 Rand tax-free amount. It's only that severance amount, the amount I'm paying you for your retrenchment, that is subject to the special tax.
All right. So, if you're in discussions with your employer and you guys are going through all of these and you keep everything in mind, is it important to also get it in writing?
That's critical for me. Being an attorney, I think we'll always tell guys to put it in writing. If you give a loan to a family member, I would say put it in writing. But in terms of your employer, it's critical for two main reasons. First reason being that, one, you can hold your employer to that. So later on, if you get short paid or if there's a dispute, you don't need to try to rely on a discussion you had in a meeting 3 months before. You can simply point to an agreement. Plainly worded, full terms in there, you can say, listen, employer, you didn't follow our own agreement. So that's critical. The second reason, maybe a little bit less important, is from a tax perspective in dealing with SARS. So you can imagine that as soon as you get this amount and you pay less tax, it might be that SARS could raise an audit on your individual tax affairs,
Yeah.
And SARS could simply ask the question, just why did you pay less tax on these amounts? We can see you paid less tax. And you'd like at that stage then to show them your severance package agreement or your retrenchment agreement and say, well, all these amounts I received was in consequence of my retrenchment. Please see attached. And they will very quickly then say, no, thank you very much. And they will close that audit very quickly,
Wonderful. All right. So just administration that really saves you a lot of trouble down the line. But is it also, can you also do an audio recording? If you, let's say, for instance, just put your phone down and just tell your employer, listen, I'm going to record this. Is that also lawful? Can you do that?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it depends, because in what context can you show someone an audio recording, How do you show that it's not been tampered with or edited, Did you get the consent of the employer? Can you even identify the people who are on that audio recording,
Mm-mm.
So perhaps a video recording, that's uninterrupted and unedited maybe, But, I think an agreement is the way to go.
Writing.
And again, you don't need a fancy agreement prepared by a lawyer, unless it really is a lot of money and you're really uncertain. You can just put something very plainly worded, even a 1-page or 2-pager,
Yeah. All right. Talking to Darren Britz, attorney at Tax Consulting SA, talking about severance packages, also the tax implications around that. So what are some of the basic calculations that employees should be aware of when calculating their tax liability?
Yeah, I think, again, there's two basic calculations you want to keep in mind. The first is for amounts that accrue to you generally, for the services you render for your employer. So I mentioned the salary, your bonus, your notice pay. That is what we say is normal tax, or your normal tax tables. And you can find that table on the SARS website as well. The second table is the one that's more interesting and perhaps a bit more exciting for us, and that's your severance benefits tax table. That looks a little bit different. You'll see there your first 500,000 has a 0 on it. And then every amount above that, a little bit of a tax rate. So above that is 8%, and then 27% it goes up, and depending on how much you get severance. But it's far less than your normal tax tables,
All right, so tax-free 500,000, but it's not only for the current retrenchment. Let's say it happened previously, and you got a severance pay. Let's say at a previous employer, maybe at a previous one before that. So is it 500,000? It's over a lifetime, right?
That's correct, and it's even worse. Not only your previous severance amounts, it's also your previous retirement lump benefits. So that amounts you got when you retired, you got from your employer or your provider, and also withdrawal. So guys who've eaten to retirement because they're out of necessity or for whatever reason, that also goes into your 500,000. We see it often that we get a tax directive from SARS that tells you how much tax you should be paying on your severance, and we show the employee, and he can't believe it because he expected 0% tax, only for us to show him that no, actually, SARS says you've already eaten into your 500,000. And he says, what? This is my first severance or my first retrenchment ever. And then, you have to go through the process of explaining, well, have you ever retired previously? Have you had withdrawals from your retirement amounts previously, your retirement savings? Now, he starts to remember. He realizes that,
All right, so Darren, tell me one thing. I mean, if your employer knows that your tax bill may be more because the exempt amount has been depleted or eaten into, may he offer a bigger package? I mean, can you negotiate your severance pay? Are you in a position? Do you have some leverage, or should you just say, "Oh, thank you so much. I'm okay with what you guys are giving me"?
Yeah, I mean, it's a sensitive point, So, I mean, we know that employees don't have as much bargaining power these days, And in terms of the law, the employer only really gives you 1 week off for every completed service, So as soon as your employer starts off a little bit more than that, kind of at the mercy of your employer, And that's why I say I wouldn't raise the tax and say, because of this reason, pay me more. I think you simply must raise the tax, have the calculation, just so it's part of the discussion. You're right. It might incentivize your employer to pay you a little bit more. But I don't think you could force the issue, if I could say that,
No, so it's definitely going to depend on the employer, him or herself. I mean, sitting here, actually, depending on their hearts, where they are, also financially. I mean, because I think especially now, they are not probably not in a good space to also give what is needed. So, Darren Britz, thank you so much for taking time to talk with us and also clarifying, attorney at Tax Consulting SA.